When you ask about Universitas Erlangga or think about applying, we will give you an insight about in numbers.
You can come to Surabaya, the second biggest city from Jakarta, and find us selecting over 9,000 students each year.
And it's easy to go anywhere from here. Only 40 minutes to international airport, 30 minutes to bus station, and 5 minutes to railway station.
We select each individual carefully for our 14 faculties to learn with more than 38,000 other students from around the world each year.
You'll be learning in 3 different campuses, connected by 3 shuttle buses, going every 30 minutes every day. No big deal.
There are 165 different programs consisting 39 bachelors, 45 masters, 13 doctorate, 3 4 years vocationals, and 17 3 years vocationals.
41 specialists and 7 professional educations. Among them, there are 5 international class and dual degree programs, and also 12 multidisciplinary programs in our postgraduate school.
Want to know our international class and dual degree program? Here we have medicine, dental medicine, veterinary medicine, pharmacist education, and psychology.
There won't be any difficulties, for 2,600 of our staff are ready to assist you at any turn of your study.
And almost 2,000 lecturers to answer your scientific questions, and 224 professors for more difficult ones. Or your answers could be anywhere among 118,000 collections in our library.
And if you wonder, are we always the seniors?
No, we have 39 student clubs with 10 different sports, 8 martial arts, 5 religious clubs, 7 creative and traditional arts, and 7 more others.
Above all, since 1954, we are proud of our students. In 2017 alone, 444 of them are getting achievements in national and international level. Collaborating with 149 universities are ready, marching with the rest of the world, cultivating the brightest future of all.
Most of the time, we won't see their faces, and we won't know their names.
Siapkan afilan, BPM, dan adrenalin. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3. Adrenalin 1 miligram masuk. Pasien apa ini?
Ya dok, jadi ini ada pasien open fraktur kudus dextra. Sudah kami bebatakan dan sudah kami imobilisasi.
Oke, stabilkan.
We're used to call them heroes. They have their own lives. But when anyone needs them,
Ya. Kapan kejadiannya? Oke, saya meluncur.
they run for them. They run through uneasy terrains and places. To help people and put their own lives aside.
Waalaikumsalam Ibu. Rumah apa kabar?
Iya nih, aku mau ngabarin kalau Bapak sakit lagi, sekarang mau masuk rumah sakit lagi.
Oh. Ayah, nitip Bapak sebentar ya. Ayah 2 minggu lagi pulang kok.
Ayah di sana tugasnya yang lancar ya.
Iya, terima kasih Ibu.
Biar tugas di sini aku yang handle.
Iya.
Cuman mau sampein itu aja ya. Ayah jaga kesehatan ya. I miss you. Assalamualaikum.
Salam. I miss you too.
That's the story of our hero.
Hello, my name is Jean-Jacques. I'm from Madagascar, and I'm a student here. I'm taking my PhD in social science at Erlangen University. And one of the reasons why I decided to choose Erlangen, first off, the facility itself. For example, like hospitals, you know, for example, like at each campus, because there are 3 campuses, A, B, and C, and each campus has its own clinic, and it's really facilitating us for if we're sick. And also other facilities, for example, like the library itself, like this place, it's really great because for us students, like especially for taking PhD, it's really hard, so we have to have, you know, access for example, like information technology, where it allows us for e-journals. All those resources really available at Erlangen University, so I'm really lucky that I have chosen this university. And second off, because of the environment itself. It's really cool, and it's a really green campus, and there's no pollution at all, and all the people are really friendly, and the students, like my classmates, and also like there's availability of canteen and everywhere. Like, you're so glad that I chose this university.
Hello everybody, I am Shah Faisal from Pakistan, and I am here studying Master of Community Pharmacy and Faculties Pharmacy University Erlangen. The university is based on international standards. Every facility at international institutes needs the university has all these facilities like experienced staff, cooperative administration, internet facilities, a flash bus for transportation, sporting events, playgrounds. Every faculty has a special library regarding the books, a variety of books you can study, the parking, the cafeterias.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. My name is Ali Raza. I'm doctoral student of economics in University of Erlangen. As a research student, there is a research center for doctoral students, which is called POSA Data or Data Center. It's help about you to you about any research type. If you have any difficulty about research, they provide you any type of data and writing facilities and how to write for a good journal.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Universitas Erlangga, with our motto, Excellence with Morality, is determined to produce graduates, researchers, or academics who are not only excellent in their expertise, but also have a great function for people and good significant contribution in improving the welfare of the society. As a public university, Universitas Erlangga is committed to build and strengthen collaboration with institutions around the world through academic activities, research, and community services. Therefore, I would like to invite you all to work together with us through academic partnership for serving our communities. I look forward to welcoming you in Universitas Erlangga in the near future. Thank you.
Together, we are the greatest political union in history, the most powerful economy. Together, we are the third largest population, the strongest army. Together, we are science, health, and culture. Together, we are creating a better world. We are discovering new worlds. Together, we are leading the ecological transition. Together, we are so many landscapes. Together, we are tolerance and progress. Together, we are education and sharing. Peace, peace, peace forever. Together, we have faced difficulties, and we will face others. But we will go through it and realize our dream. Don't listen to fear, hate, and weakness. They don't have any ambition. The future is ours. We are the European Union, and together we are unstoppable.
I feel like drifting away.
Akim.
Yes.
Hey, hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going okay?
Good, yeah. Everything is okay in Brussels. I heard this. You have a second.
In the warmth that touches your heart.
Second wave there.
Yeah, it's getting slightly better at the moment, but it's been worse than the first wave. But at the moment, it's improving again. It's getting better.
But you have this second lockdown as well. You're staying at home.
Yes, we're doing well. I'm in my office, but that's only because I live only a few minutes away from the campus. The campus is mostly deserted. Everybody has to stay at home.
Yeah. But you are in the office now, yeah?
I'm in the office, yeah, but I'm the only one in the building.
Really? Me
Yeah.
too. I'm in the office and nobody's here, yeah? I even asked the janitor to accompany me because actually we still work.
The janitor still comes.
Yeah, the janitor still come, yeah.
Sometimes comes and opens the room for me so I can get a coffee. But otherwise, there's nobody here.
Yeah, in there. But last time I met you on November last year. Yeah?
In the
in the brasserie. But I guess I'll come back again next year if the pandemic is over.
I hope so. Yes. I look forward to receiving visitors and friends and to occasionally travel again myself. It's a bit lonely 8 months in a pandemic.
Yeah, that was excitement. I don't know, it's quite terrible here.
Waves of never-ending.
But anyway,
taking you deeper.
How will this work? Because I'm still watching this promotional video from your university.
Yeah, they're still.
So how does this work?
Higher.
So we'll be connected to the panel and then it starts? Is that how it works?
Over there.
No, there will be a opening remark from the dean or some stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to. They're going to start in the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
From the tallest peak. To the deepest depth. In this land, every step leads to a day.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon from Surabaya, everyone. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. May peace be upon us. Excellencies, our distinguished speakers, Professor Dr. Hubert Zimmerman, Professor at Philips Universiteit Marburg, Professor Dr. Kim van der Boer, Professor at Vrije Universiteit Brussels, and also Dr. Philosophy Siti R. Sutanto, lecturer at Faculty of Social and Political Sciences Universitas Airlangga, and also Dr. Intan Inayatun Suparna, lecturer at Faculty of Law Universitas Airlangga. Also can regard for head of Airlangga Global Engagement. In this occasion, represented by the Deputy Head of Airlangga Global Engagement Universitas Airlangga, Dr. Dina Septiani, and also to Vice Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences and Political Sciences Universitas Airlangga, and also the Coordinator of Germany Program in Universitas Airlangga, Dr. Irfan Wahyudi. Thank you for joining us today. And also, last but not least, our moderator for today's event, Mr. Agastya Wardana, Master of International Relations, Organizing Committee, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you and welcome to the Erasmus Plus Jamwone International Webinar on Multidisciplinary Perspective on European Union during Pandemic, Current Issues and Upcoming Challenges. My name is Viro. I will be the master of ceremony of today's webinar. It is an honor for me to welcoming everyone here. So for the opening session, I would like to invite the head of Airlangga Global Engagement, represented by the Deputy Head of Airlangga Global Engagement, Dr. Dina Septiani, to deliver a welcome remarks. To Dr. Dina, the time is yours.
Thank you, Viro. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very well welcome to each one of you, most especially to Professor Hubert Zimmerman from Philips University Marburg, Germany, Guten Tag. To Professor Kim van der Boer from Vrije Universiteit Brussels, Belgium, Goeiedag. To Dr. Siti R. Susanto from Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Erlangga, and also to Dr. Intan Inayatun Suparna from Faculty of Law, Universitas Erlangga, and all the unit representatives in Universitas Erlangga, as well as these webinar's participants. Welcome to the first international webinar held by UNER under the scheme of Erasmus Plus Jean Monnet program. It is a great honor for Universitas Erlangga to be able to collaborate with Philips University Marburg and Vrije Universiteit Brussels in this webinar to discuss the topic of European Union during pandemic. We will cover current issues and upcoming challenges in the multidisciplinary perspectives. As the world is currently facing an invisible enemy and with the states taking draconian measures never before seen during peaceful times, these values and principles are becoming more and more relevant. COVID-19 pandemic has demanded changes in various sectors, both domestic and global, and it leaves no exception to European countries. States were scrambling for lockdown, and now, through restriction measures have been eased, strict limitations are being imposed everywhere, which leads us to questions with countries locking themselves up for the sake of protecting their own people, how can a regional integration thrive amidst it all? In this webinar, the answer to such questions shall be thoroughly discussed by focusing on how European Union managed to wade through all the turbulent times due to the pandemic and what changes the pandemic has brought about the regulation related to their integration system. I hope that by joining this webinar, we will have a better understanding by listening various perspectives about the current situation in Europe during the COVID-19 pandemic and also about European Union during pandemic in multidisciplinary perspectives. This webinar will not be a success without the contribution of other universities. And with regard to this, I encourage everyone here to stay engaged, to always be proactive, and endlessly support each other throughout the program. Last but not least, I wish you all have a fruitful discussion. Thank you for your attention, and once again, welcome to the webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Dr. Dina, for the warm remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite the coordinator of Jean Monnet program in Universitas Erlangga. He is Dr. Irfan Wahyudi. He is also the Vice Dean of Partnership, Research and Publication, and also Community Services in Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Erlangga. Dr. Irfan is a lecturer in Media and Communication Studies, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences. He received his PhD from Edith Cowan University School of Arts and Humanities. He is involved in the making and implementation of popular international programs in Universitas Erlangga, such as an Amerta, Erlangga Development Scholarship, KNB Scholarship, tailor-made programs, and another short programs since 2016. He also led the UNER teams in winning the Erasmus Jean Monnet module period 2017 and also 2020. So ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to invite Dr. Irfan Wahyudi.
Thank you, Viro, for the welcome. And hi, everyone. It's such an honor for me to be here and also being part of this wonderful team at the Jean Monnet module program at Universitas Erlangga. It is a quiet journey for the past 3 years. And I noticed that the team is also come and go for some people, but we maintain this program to be one of the good program that actually started for the first time, I think, in Universitas Erlangga, and it has implemented such a policy and also basic for the, well, what you can call it as for the implementation of European studies here at the university. And what I will explain is about the journey itself and how we try to get this funding from the European Union Commission. And it's not an easy, easy journey, because at first we apply this program in 2017, 2016, and it was not successful during that time. But in 2017, we are being, I think we were being put in the what you can call it as not the list of winners, but it's more on to hold at first. But for several months, we noticed and we received an email from the European Commission, from the EU Commission, that we actually succeeded in this part. And we are so happy that we can implement this in our university. The amount of funding is actually, well, we can call it not too big, but the university itself, through the rector of the university, has supported these activities by giving a match funding that can actually being put into the activities that has been held until now. We received this funding for the term of 3 years, and we implement this into several courses and also the making of modules. As we can see that Erasmus plus Jean Monnet is actually enhancing us, or give such a briefing for us to develop programs that related to a specific topic that is in a European Union integration. And we disseminate this topic into several courses. And in Universitas Airlangga, we have courses conducted by lecturers on several also multidisciplinary perspective as well. So we call this funding and also the proposal as European Union Ilmu in Multidisciplinary Perspective, or EUMAP. We have Faculty of Law implementing EU law as a course, and at the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences we have EU politics, and in the Faculty of Economics and Business we have EU in economic and business perspective, and also in the Faculty of Humanities we have the course in EU and multicultural perspective. And also in the Faculty of Public Health, we have EU migration in the perspective of public health. And this actually enhancing and increasing the discussion on the EU itself, on how we are in this university, which is located in Southeast Asia, try to look at European Union from this program. And it has been going on for 3 years. This is our last year and this is our last semester in performing the program. And as we can see that the participants who are joining this webinar is actually coming from the students who are currently or have taken these courses previously. And this also enrich their knowledge, as well as we can say that it's not only about lectures, it's not only about writing or giving the modules, but also about enhancing the experience of the students. It's not only class activities, but also we are making field trips back in 2019. And also we have international conferences that was being held at the Le Havre University in France in 2017. And we are enriching not only the students' experience, but also the lecturers' experience in regarding this topic. As I have mentioned before, we have 5 modules that has been developed, and right now it's being ready as well to be printed or to be distributed for a public, and it has been made by the what I can say the qualified team of lecturers that actually has been with us for the past 3 years. And we also recruiting students who are actually interested in this field, not only regarding maybe, for example, international relations students, but also another students from different kind of perspective and multidisciplinary courses who actually attracted to these activities. We maintain a field trip to the EU embassy in Jakarta, and we have been met personally by the vice ambassador during that time. And we also, yes, as I mentioned before, the international conferences that being put on the topic of the rise of Asia, where the lectures were going to France, especially in this city Le Havre, and also to Paris, to discuss more about what their findings on the issue of EU integration, and actually opened many doors. For example, we have our visit to the European Studies Master Program at Universitas Indonesia in Jakarta in December 2019, where we met the students and lecturers there, where we enhanced also our experience to this particular session. And also we have this focus group discussion in Yogyakarta with lecturers from Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. And also we are proudly also being part of the success of publication performed by Bu Intan and his student, that actually succeeded in publishing their writing based on this class that has been put in the Faculty of Law on EU law. And we noticed that this kind of situation where the funding has been placed not only implement into the modules, but also creating many opportunities for the students, also for staff, to enhancing their experiences and also knowledge in the issues of European Union integration. And last but not least, our webinar today, that we are planning as the highlight of what things that we have done in the past 3 years, and it has been pointed out as something that become very successful and useful in our future endeavors. So I think that's the thing that we can say, and we are being so proud of for the implementation of this program. And I hope that this webinar as well can give significant perspective onto what will be happen next in terms of European Union. And we are hoping as well, maybe next year, hopefully we can apply for the same one, or maybe enhance into different kind of programs that related to the European Union. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Irfan, for the brief explanation. And ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to our main agenda, let me have a group photo with all of the panelists, all of the speakers, and the moderator of this event. Please kindly to the speakers, turn on your camera, as my colleague here, Miss Tifa, will take a screen capture. Please, Tifa.
Muted. Everyone, please kindly hold still for a couple of seconds. We're going to take a screenshot. 1, 2, 3. All right. Once more. I think. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's all, Miss Vero. Thank you.
Thank you, Tifa, for assisting me. So now, I would like to invite the moderator of this session. Let me introduce him. So, his name is Mr. Agastya Wardana, Master of International Relations. He is a researcher at ASEAN Study Center Universitas Airlangga and also an assistant lecturer at International Relations Department Universitas Airlangga. He recently finished his master in international relations with international political economy specialization in Universitas Airlangga. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further, I would like to invite Mr. Agastya to hand over this session. Please, Mr. Agastya.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Viro, with the introduction. And I would like to welcome all of the participants and all of the outstanding speakers to our webinar here. This is an unfortunate time because we have to conduct such important and exciting webinar through telecommunication or through internet, but hopefully that did not decrease our excitement and our knowledge transfer from the extraordinary speaker to us here in Universitas Airlangga. So our topic today is a multidisciplinary perspective on European Union during pandemic, current issues, and upcoming challenges. As we know, European Union is one of the most highly sought regional organization because European Union is one of the most successful regional organizations. We here in ASEAN looking up to European Union, but COVID-19 is shaking not only countries but also regional organizations. European Union as an organization and how European country as an individual country and as a European countries dealing with the problem of pandemic. And that is what we will talk today. We will talk about the issues, the challenges facing European Union and how European Union dealing with this pandemic. The thing that all of us still dealing right now. So today our discussion will be split into two sessions. The first session will be held by two speakers, and then we'll have Q&A session, and they will proceed to the second session with the Q&A session in the last session. So for all of you, if you have question, you can use the Q&A features to ask your question, and then I will read your question to be answered by the speaker. Now, I will proceed to introduce the first speaker. The first speaker with the topic of endemic in the pandemic, the EU in the 2020s will be delivered by Professor Hubert Zimmermann. He is Professor of International Relations at Philipps University, Marburg. He has research interests focused on international security, global financial and monetary policy, the European Union, specifically foreign economic and security policy. Professor Hubert Zimmermann, the time is yours. I think you need to unmute your mic first, Professor.
So, okay.
Okay.
Now. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be at this webinar and to give a talk here. I mean, of course, it would be even more wonderful to be actually in Indonesia, but as we know, times are tough. Thanks also very much to Dr. Siti Susanto for organizing and inviting me, and we hope very much at Marburg University that the connections and Erasmus Plus exchanges between our university and the University of Erlangen will work out, and we'll have a lot of results. So okay, so as was already announced in the introduction, we are talking today about the future of the European Union, especially as a regional organization in these times of pandemic. And yeah, this pandemic can be seen as a kind of perfect storm for many countries, for regional organizations. It's a kind of thing of incubator, which has wrapped a world which in a kind of cocoon, and we do not know exactly what will emerge in the end, which state or which region will emerge as a beautiful butterfly and which will be an ugly moth. So this is really hard to say. It's also a trying time for the European Union, which is still the most kind of far-reaching experiment of cooperation between multiple nation states. And so in this sense, of course, the pandemic is something that really asks for cooperation, requires cooperation. It's a fundamental challenge to combat such a menace. And there are lots of other dangers like climate change that would really require cooperation. However, as many of you might know, the EU's fragility was also demonstrated by COVID. In the beginning, we had the closing of borders, restrictions of medicines for other countries, and the responses of many European states have not been really extremely successful given the number of infections and deaths. But on the other hand, the pandemic also showed the resilience of the EU. There were EU citizens from all different countries were brought back by different countries. So like Germany flying back French tourists from far away and the other way around, and so on and so on. There were huge economic stimulus programs, common development of vaccines. So yeah, we have at least two that are going to be operative very soon with European participation. So yeah, it's a good time to share a couple of thoughts of where the EU stands and whether the balance of the European Union is more towards like a shining example for the world, or whether it's yeah, as I wrote in my title, whether it's an anemic organization in the pandemic, which is not really working. So I'm trying to share my screen. Hopefully, yep, this is gonna work. Yeah, it seems at least.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so yeah, and the first thing to be remembered when talking about this is yeah, that this is not the kind of first crisis that the EU has witnessed in the last decade. It's been a whole long decade of different crises, and since my time is limited, and many of you probably notice, I just listed a couple of them falling into the domains of domestic, foreign, and economic, which straddles domestic and foreign with each other. So there's this whole series of economic crises that the European Union had to tackle at least since the financial crisis 2008, 2009, which then had huge ripple effects into the domestic systems. Also the Euro crisis, which had a strong impact on the legitimacy of the European Union as an international organization. The dark years of Donald Trump as a person representing really the antithesis of everything that the EU probably stands for, the migration crisis, and so on, and so on. And obviously, I mean, it's pretty clear that. Let me go back. It's it's obvious that we are still going on with these crises, and just in the recent days we had what we can call the dog bites the hand that feeds it crisis. There's a big debate about the EU program to emergency package for COVID-19 plus the next 7-year budget, and this budget is attached with certain conditionalities that have to do with the rule of law. This is especially now particularly serious because the European Parliament has a huge say in the budgetary decision making, and now enforces these kind of things. And two countries, Hungary and Poland, yeah, have a yeah, have in the recent times had problems with the way the EU sees the rule of law, and now they are blocking the packages for the moment, threatening a veto. Whether it happens, it's another question, because actually they get a lot of their funds from the EU, so it will be a dog biting the hands that feeds it. Nevertheless, I don't want to go too deeply into this crisis, but it unites in a nutshell the kind of core questions that happens when a world and when different societies are still very strongly attached to their national identities, and can they work together? It's the big question of self-determination against the community spirit. It's the big question of, are there any community values that can cross borders and then can be forced across borders? Are the common interests enough to really allow us to force other countries, other societies to do things in a certain way? And that's not a new question. Actually, this year we have the 50th anniversary of the little known Werner Plan. I have a quote from it at the bottom, and the Werner Plan was the first blueprint for a monetary union in stages in Europe, which it was published in October 1970 by a committee chaired by then Luxembourg Prime Minister Werner, and it was remarkably similar then to the Delors plan of the late 1980s, early 1990s, which actually led to monetary unification and monetary union in the European Union, which was, I think, the most spectacular step, because as we experienced in the years since then, nothing binds countries as much together as having a common currency. Anyway, already the authors of the Werner Plan wrote that the increasing interpenetration of the economies has entailed a weakening of autonomy for national economies and national economic policies. The control of economic policy has become all the more difficult because the loss of autonomy at the national level has not been compensated by the inauguration of community policies, and they clearly saw that the European Union was not this kind of end in itself, but it was a means to regain capacity, autonomy, probably even democracy at the national level that has been lost because of external elements. But in the Werner Plan, you also clearly saw this problem of how you bring together these different economic models and the different ways how societies deal with labor, with all kinds of different economic facets, with the welfare states and so on. And it was clear then afterwards, I mean, the Werner Plan within a very short time failed. It was clear that there were too many differences, and it was also a clash of values, of economic philosophies. And in a way, we have the same clash now with the current problem with Hungary and Poland. In the background, there's the question of mutualizing debt, so making the debt a common matter. And of course, debt is about values too, and you share debt only in a community with the same values. So in the background, there is this very political question. And at the same time, the Werner Plan was also a reaction to developments abroad, to financial globalization, which started the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system, American unilateralism under Richard Nixon, nothing new. So it was an attempt to regain autonomy at the regional level that had been lost at the national level. And yet it created all these problems of putting different values together. And these ambiguities and difficulties of a common response to such challenges are easily demonstrated if we look at public opinion. So we can see how in the upper half there is the image of the EU, which is currently, yeah, it's okay, but not really good. And you see it's an up and down, but there's not this, like, if we would go back into the 70s and 80s, we would have much higher positive figures there. So there's a lot of negativity also occurring, and the bottom was reached during the Euro crisis, which was actually a situation in which the economies of certain member countries really faced a challenge from the European Union, a deep challenge, which also went against democratic will of the people in certain sense, with good economic rationales, but nevertheless, this really undermined the legitimacy of the European Union. And you see also that you have very different attachments to the European Union in the latest poll, particularly in some core countries like France and Italy. There's a relatively high distrust of the European Union, so there's a huge difference among the different states here that of course makes it very difficult to get common responses. And on the other hand, you have here on the right hand side a poll which says how or shows how the coronavirus changed the attitudes of people towards the EU, and most people actually say that coronavirus has shown the need for greater European cooperation. So people expect actually from the European Union that it really responds to those challenges. So there's at the same time, there's a level, a shaky level of trust, and at the same time, very high expectations here. And another big problem is that the differences are not, the splits are not only between states, but they are also between people. For example, here you see polls about elite and public opinions, attitudes towards the European Union. This is already from 2017, but it shows that what the achievements and the failures of the European Union is not really agreed to among the elites like us sitting here and supporting that, and the kind of general public. I mean, the elites, they find peace very important, like these abstract things, and they hate bureaucracy and excessive regulation. Publics are worried about mass immigration, things like this, and think that the lofty goals like peace are much less important. And they also have a very relatively high notion of the euro as a failure. So there are all these differences within countries about what the European Union can do or not, and the EU has to tackle with these differences if it wants to deal with the challenges, like its declining share of the global GDP, the difficulties of promoting multilateralism as a way of doing things, reacting to RCEP, for example, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership recently concluded, which is a trade agreement without conditionalities, and the EU in its trade policy, which is probably its most potent instrument, increasingly imposes conditionalities that are derived from values in the treaties, but also now really pushed by a lot of political actors in the European Parliament and in national parliaments that have more say in decision making. So how can we react to that? The EU as a regional security actor, there are huge instability in the fringes of the EU in the border regions. Syria and Libya are cases, but also the recent conflicts or conflicts in the Caucasian region, or the conflict between Greece and Turkey. And also the question is, how can the EU pursue its leadership in climate change? Is it strong enough to really deal with that? And usually in earlier times, this was always done in the framework of the transatlantic partnerships. So the EU always was able to count on the Americans or on American support, but the recent years have shown that this is difficult. So one of the core questions that we are facing now is if there is going to be a new transatlantic era. There's been a phone calls now from European politicians to Biden, and Commission President Ursula von der Leyen twittered that she told Biden that the both of them should shape the global agenda through cooperation and shared values. So the hope is there, but the question is whether, I mean, it's welcome that they shape the global agenda, and whether it's possible. I think for the US, the situation really has changed. Even with Biden in much of the EU, there is no this image of a broken hegemon or of a Suez moment. The Suez crisis in 1956 was the moment, or the moment when it became clear that Britain was no longer a global empire, but just a regional power. So has this moment now come? for the United States, and it's definitively clear in the European Union that there are huge problems that are going to persist in the United States. There is the defective political system that makes it very difficult to tackle the splits in the American society. There is little will for the provision of global public goods. It's not clear how the Senate will look like, but there is this kind of global leadership that the US exerted over the past 60, 70 years. That's probably not going to come back, and nothing illustrates this better than the fact, if we look at the international response to the pandemic, that there wasn't any leadership. And if we imagine only 10 years ago, the US would certainly be in the center of internationally coordinated attempts to deal with this pandemic, and the outcome, I'm sure, would have been much better. So I think instead of a kind of renewed transatlantic area, we rather have a reassertion of EU strategic autonomy or sovereignty, where the EU tries to shape its own kind of position in the global world. There will be a very strong emphasis on digital sovereignty. So there's a clear awareness that Europe has fallen back in this area, and that there are lots of threats that are coming from the digital age, and one has to deal with that. And there will be also continued resistance to the authoritarian axis, whatever that means, from China to Bolsonaro in Brazil. But definitively the domestic situation in the EU is like that there can be no kind of easy cooperation with these leaders. So these is the situation, and the question has been raised whether, okay, given all these challenges, is this again the hour of Europe, and will we come together now? Recently, lots of people have talked about a Hamiltonian moment, quoting Alexander Hamilton, the American leader who managed to achieve the federalization of the United States through the mutualization of debt after the Revolutionary War. And we have this kind of mutualization of debt now in Europe. The hope is that in this way we can create unity from diversity. But actually for Europe, it's more a case of Al Milward, who is a famous historian of European integration, who actually was on my PhD committee, now long dead, and who wrote a really very important book on the European rescue of the nation state, which sees Europe not as a goal in itself, but as a way to rescue the nation state and not to dissolve the nation state against the various challenges. So saving diversity through unity. So in one way or the other, the EU will have to reconcile these two notions. This is going to be a tough balancing act, and the EU will therefore certainly be in kind of crisis all the time, because it has to balance these two notions. And it's extremely important also that people understand the case for working together, but that this case for working together is not imposed from above. It has to be a matter of choice. And therefore, it's probably not a bad thing that Brexit happened, where people actually have seen that there is a possibility to exit the European Union, and it should be easier to exit the European Union if nations and societies are not happy with that. So to conclude, is the EU a model? Yes, but not in the sense of being a shining example for the world, but it's a model as a laboratory of global cooperation. In its core, there are so many problems that are typical for the problems that come up when nations try to cooperate. Okay, so and that I think is the most important lesson that the EU can probably give to the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Herbert. I'm sorry to cut you because we have limited time allocation here. Okay, now we will proceed to the second speaker, a very interesting discussion from Professor Hubert about the notion or how European Union should move forward. Now we move to the second speaker. The second speaker is Dr. Siti Rumawanti Susanto. She will present about the second wave of COVID-19 in Europe, another rocky road for EU solidarity. She is currently the head of Department of IR Department in Faculty of Social Sciences, Universitas Airlangga. I yield time to you, Dr. Siti Rahmawati, and I would like to inform you that you have 10 minutes to present your presentation. I will inform you through chat if your time is up.
Okay.
Dr. Rahmawati, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Agus. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished speakers, colleagues, and students. Thank you for having me. It is a great pleasure for me to be here among very outstanding speakers and also colleagues. And yeah, before I proceed my presentation, my short presentation, I would like to welcome Professor Zimmerman and also Professor Kim for being here today, and especially for Professor Zimmerman. Thank you for being here and fulfilling our invitations. Hopefully that the cooperation between Philip University Marburg and Universitas Airlangga will be more productive and more fruitful in the future. Regarding my presentation today, I would like to share my screen first. Hopefully, everyone can see this. Yeah. I would like to present a topic which is currently happening in the European Union regarding the second wave of COVID-19, and is it bringing a new rocky road for the EU solidarity or another way around? So I raise this issue because there is a very significantly increasing number of COVID-19 cases and mortality rate in European Union since October 2020. Even though few of states also experienced the same increasing number started in September. And some scholar has recognized that actually EU has recognized the possibility of the second wave of COVID, but it has unlikely taken adequate measures. Therefore, there are different responses and assessment among member countries. And why I related with the EU solidarity? Because during the crisis, the solidarity usually get affected with the situations, especially when it relates to European Union, because solidarity becomes the fundamental values in EU integrations. It is also a bedrock that brings the European Union into what we acknowledge at the moment, very advanced transformations of example of international regional integrations. Of course, during the crisis, actually, European Union has experienced previous crises, several crises before in the last 10 years, as mentioned by Professor Zimmerman as well, that there is a financial crisis, followed by refugees, and then followed by Brexit, and the last one is COVID-19. So the solidarity, of course, is under threat during crisis, even in this second wave of COVID-19. So I have a very simple research question. Does the second wave of COVID-19 become another test for EU solidarity? Because since the financial crisis, EU has a very difficult time to manage its integrations and its solidarity among its members. And yeah, before I proceed to my argument, I will show to some of findings provided by the ECDC, the European Center for Disease Control and Prevention. That started from mostly in October, the rate of COVID cases has been significantly increased. And this is not only about the cases, about the mortality rate also showing the similar trend. Therefore, I then relate the situation with the response given by member state, even though somehow it is not really related with the COVID-19, the second wave of COVID-19 itself. Actually, it is a response given by member state along with the second wave of COVID-19. So along with these situations, there are some significant situations given by the several of European Union member states, shown by the Southern European countries, which intend to not accept what is financial recovery loan, which is included as the project of the next generation AU as the recovery and resilience framework to overcome the COVID-19. And it has been also mentioned by Professor Zimmermann that Hungary and Poland is very, very upset with the decisions of European Union to give a very limited access for them to have what it called the grant within the project of the next generation of AU, because according to Hungary and Poland, this limitation access is due to political and ideological reason. To some extent, AU, these two countries think that they are not really obeying the rule of law given by the European Union. So yeah, Hungary and Poland finally vetoed the pandemic stimulus given by European Union, and this somehow, even though not really totally deadlocked, but somehow it will be an annoying process for the European Union to continue its recovery and resilience planning. Regarding the AU solidarity, whether it is going to have a rocky road or just a smooth situations, I refer my argument to the statement given by Misal Chini and Verdun, saying that AU experiences what is centrifugal and centripetal trajectories. For centrifugal trajectories, it actually refers to decreasing level of cohesions and solidarity after experiencing several crises. So AU has more fragmented into the situations. But in the other hand, European Union also experienced centripetal trajectories. It means that it has a very increasing level of solidarity in dealing with several crises. So it means that AU has several feasible crisis resolutions which can bring them together on the right track in dealing with this future crisis. Therefore, it means that, in which way this second wave of COVID-19 will bring European Union forward. And I according to my argument, I think that the second wave of COVID-19 has not directly threatened the AU solidarity, because different from the first wave of COVID-19, I think in this second COVID-19, European Union has relatively well equipped with crisis resolutions. According to von der Leyen, the president of European Commission, it has already make a plan of making reservations for almost 350 million vaccine for the people of European Union. And also there is a new health package established by the Ministry of Health in European Union. So they will have a tool to anticipate whether there will be a future crisis of future health crisis in the future.
Dr. Siti, I would like to inform you, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, but of course, this
presentation
crisis
did
is
not
still
showing.
going
Sorry.
on. Sorry.
Yeah, I have checked you several times, but your PowerPoint did not showing. Okay.
I don't know, maybe there is a technical problem. Okay, but I think I only have 2 minutes more. I continue my presentations, but unfortunately the second wave is still going on. It might decrease the solidarity in the future. We never know. But we will see what happens in the future. And then when the solidarity, when the situation get worse, and then the solidarity can be worse, and then yeah, another rocky road for the European Union. But according to my opinion, European Union cohesion and solidarity during second wave of COVID-19 is relatively stable. And it is a bit different from what happened in the first crisis of COVID-19 happened in January until March 2020. But the Union still struggle hard to prevent the repetitions of the first wave. And the solution that have been done so far is by accommodating input from other significant member countries. For example, from frugal state, just like Netherlands and Sweden in this case, and perhaps it will be better to reduce the dominant role of German and Franco influence in making the U.S. pandemic recovery framework for all the member states, because at the moment there is a kind of distrust toward the German Franco influence, which are too dominant within the EU's pandemic recovery framework. Thank you, Agus. I think that's all.
Thank you.
My presentations.
Thank you, Bu Siti. Interesting point raised by Bu Siti about the future of the second wave pandemic, that it will not change the dynamics of the EU that much. Okay, now we will entering the Q&A session. There are actually several questions here, but because due to the time constraint, I will pick 3 questions. The first question is to Professor Zimmerman. Actually, there are 2 questions that were similar. The question was about the climate change and the EU policy. What is your climate forecast about the effect of the crisis? This is from Ardo Saratoga. What mistakes should be avoided and what course should be set? And in similar notes, there are questions about the climates too, about how EU manage the current climate crisis, because the pandemic is becoming a disruption to EU initiative on climate change. This question is from Muhammad Saud. So the first question is about climate change and the EU management. The second question is from Hasbi. He asked about how the EU managed the rising tension about the right-wing populist movement in certain countries, and how the EU managed the rising wave of Euroscepticism. And the last question from Anissa Regita Cahyani. She asked about how the EU managed its members to work together to overcome this pandemic, because of course every country have its own rules and interests. How does European Union manage those different rules and interests from member states? So 3 questions for Professor Zimmerman.
Okay, thank you very much. So these are really big questions. So
yeah, sure.
It will not be possible to have a completely comprehensive answer as regards the impact of the pandemic on the climate change. It's obviously unclear, as was already written in the question. I mean, at the moment, the air quality in the European Union actually seems to improve. There has been yesterday or the day before, there have been notices, but obviously once the industrial and economic activity catches up, I think it will go back quite quickly to the previous situation, and I'm a bit skeptical whether the world really, or I'm skeptical whether the world really manages to achieve a common answer to climate change, because it's such a long-term, slow-moving problem. It's very difficult to bring countries actually along on a threat that is not as easily understandable as the pandemic. And we've seen, even in the pandemic, we have seen huge parts of the population that just don't believe in COVID-19 or something like this. So it's difficult. Anyway, yeah, getting countries, the European countries, to actually move along with the climate change program. Of course, there's you have to impose certain conditions, and there has to be some kind of convergence of policies. And I think that the solution really for the European Union, which is a huge community, is really to work in certain core groups, not as a whole, which will be really too difficult. And if countries can opt out, and if it's easy to opt out, then this also gives legitimacy to the situation where you actually opt in. If you decide to apply for the club, then you actually have to follow by the rules. And this is also true, what we would probably have to say to Poland and Hungary, that, yeah, actually they knew what the kind of rules are and what the political situation and so on is. So they were buying into the community, and you have to take on the disadvantages of loss of sovereignty. It's just unavoidable if you go to the European Union. You cannot talk about being a sovereign nation and then actually want to be part of the European Union. If you want to be a completely sovereign nation, you have to stay out. That's pretty clear. Nevertheless, I mean, people for all the decisions have to be brought along. They cannot be imposed from above, and it's really difficult. For example, a good example is the euro. There have been only relatively few public referenda on the euro, and it just came as a decision of elites. And of course, that gives a lot of problems of acceptance for the economic policies that accompany the fact of having a common currency. Dealing with right-wing populism, again, of course, I would answer in a similar way. The right-wing populism, or populism overall, has been in one way also a response to the irresponsiveness of policies, of policymakers. So there's been a lot of effects of economic liberalization, financial integration, migration, labor migration, and so on, effects that benefited mostly people that could live anywhere and that don't have restrictions, but not the people that live somewhere, that are stuck to their places, that don't speak the languages, cannot move around, that do not have flexible jobs, or are stuck in their national welfare system. And obviously it's important to make all the policies, or to think about how to make the policies that you are pursuing legitimate, and look for a just distribution of the costs and the benefits in that sense. Okay, and then the final question was how the EU manages to get its members moving along. I mean, of course, there are the treaties and the rules and the votes and the things, but a very important thing is also kind of horse trading. So you accept certain policies that you don't like so much, because you know the others will accept also some policies of yours that they probably don't like so much. So there's always this kind of give and take. In many important decisions, there is still a veto by single member states, so it can't move along. And there are a lot of different veto points, also the European Parliament. So you have to negotiate and negotiate and negotiate endlessly, which always gives people the impression that the whole union is not moving at all. But that's actually, if you have so many interests and so many different points of view that have to be brought into the decision making before the decision can be made, it's just always going to be a long, drawn out negotiating process. And that's just a way of doing things. It's not very efficient. but it's unavoidable.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zimmerman. Dr. Siti, you have addition?
Yes, regarding the question from Hasbi, I would like to clarify that Hasbi, it seems that Hasbi make a similarity between frugal state and Visegrad state. I think between Visegrad and frugal has different orientations in their political action. For according to my my readings and my knowledge, I think frugal state represented by Netherlands and then Sweden, Denmark, and Austria, I think they have more constructive and proactive reasoning in conducting their political action rather than try to criticizing and representing Euroscepticism within the union. While Visegrad is a bit criticizing the policy made by the Brussels, but somehow I still believe that it can be softened with the material incentive given by the union to these Visegrad countries, because somehow Visegrad is consists of the stronger and populist political elites compared to other European Union members. So I would like to clarify between the Visegrad and frugal, they have a very different political orientations in conducting their critiques and response towards Brussels. And then, according Ardo Saratoga, when living in Duisburg, I was living nearby near Duisburg at the time, Munster. And I heard from some colleagues and also reading from newspaper that North Rhine-Westphalia is also was also suffered from the massive COVID-19 cases as well. But I don't know the exact situations in Duisburg and exactly in North Rhine-Westphalia. Maybe Professor Zimmerman can update the latest situations in the NRW, NRW.
Yes,
Thank you.
actually, since I'm sitting in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is the most populous state in Germany, well, at the moment we have a kind of light lockdown. So restaurants are closed, no parties, no private parties that involve more than 2 families. Of course, masks everywhere and distancing rules, but the shops and so on are open and the schools are open, which is very important. So it seems, I mean, from the last few days that it goes slowly down again, the rate of infections, but the lockdown will be extended until Christmas. And then this is usually a time where you have a lot of festivities and family parties and things like this. So it seems like Christmas and New Year's will not be happening really this year. So, and hopefully then in January, the currently high numbers are gone down. So obviously it really has to do with the relatively cold climate now at the moment. So the winter actually, everybody or many people hoped that summer would actually stop the pandemic and it wouldn't show up, but actually the second wave is fully here. But the more important thing is also how the hospital situation is. So this is still relatively stable. So for people in intensive care and so on, and there's actually only few places in the European Union where you can say that the health system is overburdened at the moment, but hopefully it kind of stays like this.
Okay, thank you, Professor Zimmerman and Dr. Siti Rahmawati Susanto. Now we move to the second session of our webinar. The second session will be conducted by 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Dr. Kim van der Borg. He is a professor of international economic law and diplomacy at the Free University Brussels. He will be deliver presentation titled European Union from an Unseen Crisis to Hopeful Ambition. To Professor Dr. Kim van der Borg, the time is yours. You have 15 minutes to present your presentation. If the time is 5 minutes less, I will inform you through chat. The time is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I am not using a PowerPoint.
Okay.
My background is international trade, and for the last year, I've also been responsible for the law program. So I want to talk from both my expertise and from my personal experience in what has happened in the European Union during this pandemic. I'm speaking from Brussels, the administrative capital of the European Union. So observing it also closely on the different dynamics of the European Union and its functioning has been interesting and has been disappointing. That's also where the title comes from Unseen Crisis to Hopeful Ambition. What we have observed in the beginning of the pandemic was a major disappointment. And I think there I have to agree with my colleague, Professor Zimmerman. We are not a shining example. I think there's a lot that can be learned from the European Union as a model, both in what we have done well and in how we have and are failing. The European Union, in terms of its competencies, of course, does not have health as one of its core competences. So the EU as an actor is limited to how it can act. But if we look at the first wave, then we see that even in the basic principles of the European Union, and I would like to refer to the four freedoms, the core elements on which the European Union has been founded, namely the freedom of goods, of capital, of services, and of people, we saw some quite, for me, shocking things happening. We saw, for example, border closures. I'm old enough to have seen border infrastructure, but many people, my students, for example, have never seen border infrastructure. We don't have physical borders. You can travel from Belgium to Germany to the Netherlands to France. If there is still border infrastructure, it's a long time deserted, and many of the borders do not have infrastructure at the border to control the border. So the experience of a sudden closure of the border as an emergency reaction of member states was a shocking experience of how quickly a core principle, namely that freedom to move across borders, could be stopped, and was stopped in physical ways. Seeing sea containers being put on the middle of the road to stop cars from crossing was a very strange and unseen experience for most. So in that sense, the European Union, I think, started its reaction to the pandemic largely with a failure. There were some positive aspects, like, for example, coordination in repatriation of citizens that was not based on nationality, but very often the immediate reaction was a national reaction. Look after your own citizens within the national borders, which is not a positive thing for the European Union. And it was done in ways that were shocking to many and very personally felt. For example, one of the first reactions, Belgium being a more northern country, we draw a lot of our fruit and vegetables from southern countries, seeing trucks loaded with fruit and vegetables from Italy being stuck at the border and leading to shortages here in the supermarkets. That was very unexpected. This is not something that we thought would happen. It was also not necessary, but the lack of coordination and the lack of active intervention of the European Union in terms of the reaction to the pandemic was a major disappointment. And not only for food, but also in general supplies, also in medical supplies. We saw that the first response was not a response of solidarity. It was a response of scrambling, every member state looking after themselves and trying to secure what they could on the basis of their national needs rather than coordinating with other member states. This can be understood because it was an emergency that we were not prepared for which there were no real channels at the EU level, but it's still a disappointment. And it was not only for goods and for services, the provision of medical services, for example, across the border, but also for persons. Closing the border also meant that individuals could not cross national borders, leading to some very personal reactions of, for example, families living across the border. There were several examples between Belgium and France and Belgium and the Netherlands where family members were just living across the border. I mean, these borders are normally open and they are not a daily physical hindrance to people's movement. So there are many close contacts across borders because in terms of movement and mobility of people, there shouldn't be any borders. So the immediate reaction of closing the borders was a very shocking experience to many, but also a realization, I think, to many that the European Union is not just a bureaucracy in Brussels, but also has meaning. And when it fails, it is felt. It is felt also on a very personal level, that as an individual, you cannot meet your family members who might live only a few hundred meters away. That you immediately see the reactions in your local supermarket. That was a very personally felt reaction. I think in many ways a shocking crisis, but also leading to some hopeful signs of awareness of the importance of the European Union, what it has been able to do, together with how it has failed in the past and how it is failing now, and how it is reacting in the second wave. And I think that's where the hopeful ambition comes from. If we look at the failures initially, those failures are being addressed. And addressing those failures is not easy because a lot of it has to do with long-term processes and thinking that have been ongoing for at least a decade in some cases. So I want to review with you a few examples. And one of the examples is a long discussion, a policy discussion within the EU and its member states on where we stand in terms of industrial production in the European Union. And this became very acute because we didn't have personal protection equipment, neither for individuals nor for our hospitals. Our hospitals, our care centers for the elderly, sometimes ran out of personal protection equipment, leading to further infections, no doubt. And there, the reaction has been that in certain cases, it's important that we have some autonomy. Autonomy not at the level of the member states, but at the level of the European Union, that we also should have strategic stockpiles, not as a member state, but at the European Union. That requires long-term planning, long-term policy changes, and policy changes that have been largely discussed in theory, where now in practice we have to quickly act and implement them. And an element of that is the reindustrialization policy. There is no broad policy of reindustrialization in the EU. We are part of a multilateral trading system, and the EU is very committed to that multilateral trading system. But in some cases, it's important for strategic purposes, for purposes of independence, that we also have certain capacities ourselves. And one of the capacities that we have developed, for example, in the context of the Benelux, or a collaboration between Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, was to be able to make sure that we could supply our own needs in terms of medical personal protection equipment, masks mostly. So Belgium and the Netherlands started a production of both surgical masks and medical masks, within an agreement that Belgium would focus on one kind, the Netherlands would focus on the other, and that we would exchange our needs and supply each other. And as soon as our capacity would reach beyond the immediate needs, that would also be part of a wider EU strategy. So a very concrete implementation of a strategy that has been discussed for a very long time, an element of reindustrialization within the context of the EU's commitment to a multilateral trading system. The second element is the awareness that we have gained in terms of what we actually produce locally. If we look at some of the first vaccines in against the COVID-19, the BioNTech Pfizer and the Janssen's vaccines. The Pfizer local headquarters, actually just the office next to me, I just have to cross the street. But the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine is being produced in Belgium, in a village in Flanders. If we look at Janssen's, originally a Belgian company, but now part of an American pharmaceutical company. But in both cases, the research has been done in Europe, Germany and Belgium. The production is happening in Belgium. So there's also a stronger awareness of the strengths that we have in terms of research and developments, the capacities that we have in terms of production, and the awareness that we have to treat these with certain care, that we cannot simply open up to international investment and allow certain capacities to be lost. We also have to be appreciative of the investments that we make, the research and development that's being done, and the role that is being played there, both by member states in terms of supporting research and development, but also by the EU. The program, for example, that is supporting you, the Erasmus Plus Jean Monnet, is an example of exchange, but the EU has a lot of programs on collaboration in terms of research that is supporting these long-term efforts in terms of health capacity and in terms also of being at the forefront of continued industrial production. Similarly, with the experience that we had in the first wave, namely shortages in supermarkets, partly it was a panic reaction of consumers, but also partly by the border restrictions that all of a sudden occurred. If we look on the long-term development in the EU in its policies, we look at the farm-to-fork policies, we see that one of the elements there is also local production, to support that, to make sure that we have a certain capacity for self-sufficiency, without endangering our commitment to the multilateral trading system. So this, sorry, I see that there is, okay, the commitment to the multilateral trading system. Similarly to people, we see that in the second wave there are no border closures. There are certain administrative measures being taken. For example, if I want to go to one of the neighboring countries, I can go for 48 hours without any restrictions, but I have to inform the Belgian government that I've been there in case the region where I have been is suffering an increase in infection rates, that this can be followed up, and that if necessary, I can be told to quarantine myself. We have also seen new forms of solidarity. As I said in the very beginning, it is the case that EU does not have a lot of competencies in the area of health, but we see that within the possibilities of member states, also new forms of solidarity have occurred, where in the first wave, the immediate reaction, I think it was a panic reaction of member states, was to look after the immediate needs within the country itself. We now see, for example, that Belgium a few weeks ago reached the limits of its healthcare capacity, and in some region of Belgium beyond the abilities. And we saw that Germany took over patients in ICU because, for example, in the border region in Liège, the hospitals no longer had capacity, and Belgium was quickly reaching its ceiling in terms of being able to cope with ICU patients, and Germany took over patients from Belgium to alleviate the immediate pressure on the Belgian system, similarly with patients from France. So these solidarity mechanisms that have been informally organized, I think in the future will also be part of what informs the policy of the EU. And in that sense, I think there is hopeful ambition. Where the first wave was clearly an unseen crisis, the hopeful ambition is that a lot of policies that have been talked about in the past are being seen in a sharper light. And I think there is also a greater appreciation, both by member states, but also by citizens, that the EU can do a lot. There's also a lot that it cannot do. And there, I think we have to find a new balance. So what does it stand for? How does it do it? And how do we communicate to all, especially to the citizens who are quite skeptical? What is the role of that EU, and what can it do for you? In some cases, it has now been very personally felt. But I think it's also important to make explicit what the role is of the European Union and what the possibilities are of the European Union in terms of supporting that role towards the future. And where I want to close with is my personal experiences directly linking to your Jean Monnet program, namely people and the movement of people also means the movement of students and researchers. And we have been managing within the university the immediate impact. And we see that the mobility programs, of course, are largely being suspended because of the limitations on travel, the risks that there are, the limits on air travel at the moment. And we see a new awareness of how we could work together. And that new awareness is that there's a lot that is possible through digital collaboration. This is what is bringing us together here. But also that digital collaboration is not a substitute for mobility, that people have to be able to get together and that to really do research together, to have real learning experiences, this can be blended with digital experiences, but it's not a substitute for actual physical encounters. And that therefore, what we need to do is find ways of digitally supporting physical mobility. And since I have 1 minute, let that be my invitation to you all. The Vrije Universiteit Brussel already has a good collaboration for a long number of years with Universitas Erlangga. So I hope that the next time we can meet physically, and I invite you to return to our campus in Brussels and to welcome you here. And I look forward to visiting you there for an actual seminar where we can sit together. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kim, the insight about the European Union. In similar note with Professor Zimmerman, that EU may be not a shiny example, but there are things that we can learn, and hopefully EU can be prepared for the second wave of the pandemic. Now we move on to the fourth speaker. The fourth speaker is Dr. Intan Suparna. She is currently a lecturer at Faculty of Law Universitas Erlangga. She holds PhD degree from Vrije University Brussels and Ghent University Belgium. She will talk about export restriction during pandemic, lessons from European Union. Dr. Intan Suparna, you have 10 minutes. If you have 5 minutes left, I will inform you. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, because I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to explain my presentation as brief as possible. And I don't have also a PPT because it's only 10 minutes. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the export restriction during pandemic and what we can learn from EU. As Professor Kim has told us that actually there is a lot of a restriction during the pandemic. So as we know that the COVID-19 outbreak has already caused deep disruption to world trade, affecting both the supply and demand sides of the global economy. Well, many countries who impose export restriction, they impose restriction from medical supply to food products to prevent shortage of food and medical equipment during the pandemic. So most of the exporting countries are the WTO members. So we are going to explain in the global trade first. Where according to the GATT 1994, Article 11, Paragraph 1, export restriction other than duties, taxes, or other charges are prohibited. So I'm going to underline this, it's prohibited. However, in terms of the export-oriented measures, Article 11, Para 2, number A, GATT 1994, state that the general prohibition in Article 11, Para 1, shall not extend to export prohibitions temporarily applied to prevent or relieve critical shortage of foodstuff or other product essential to the exporting members. This is the rule. So I'm going to explain one by one the words, the Article 11, Para 2. Under the parlance of the GATT 1994, Article 11, paragraph 2, the words export prohibitions refer to the export ban, export quotas, or other measures such as export license. And according to appellate body in the China raw material case, the word of temporarily applied describe a measure applied for a limited time and is taken to abridge a passing need to prevent or relieve critical shortage. However, the export restriction should be discontinued as soon as the condition giving rise to them have ceased to exist. Yeah. And then the words of product essential to the exporting members refer to the condition that certain products such as medical equipment, COVID-19 test kits, personal protective equipment, thermometers are indispensable to combat the pandemic. And then the last is the word prevent or relieve a critical shortage refers to the prevent deficiency in quantity in the product in time of the health crisis like pandemic. So basically, even though in the international trade international trade law mentioned that there is a prohibition of the export restriction, but in terms of the pandemic, in terms of the essential situation at the country, it's possible to impose the export restriction. So what is actually the experience of the European Union to impose the export restriction during the pandemic? Well, based on Article 5 EU Regulation 2015-479 on common rules for export, the Article 5 mentioned that in order to prevent a critical situation from arising on an account of a shortage of essential products, yeah, or to remedy such a situation, EU may make the export of a product subject to the production of an export authorization. So it means that EU is possible to impose the export restriction by imposing the export license, for example. So therefore, EU is implementing Regulation 2020 number 402 that made the export of personal protective equipment subject to authorization until end of April. It means that the export from EU is prohibited unless certain license is obtained. So the exporter should obtain the certain license from their government, the member of the EU. Then shortly after, the EU revised its regulation by implementing Regulation 2020 number 426 and issue guidelines, thereby effectively lifting the restriction for the FTA, for the European Free Trade Area. And on 26 April, export license would have to be obtained only for face mask, but this never been materialized, never been imposed. Instead, EU continues to control the export of PPE under EU regulation 2025/68, where the Commission will monitor national licensing authorities. Hence, the restriction on import to third countries or non-European European Union countries remain in place. So what is the impact of the export restriction from EU to the non-European countries? For small developing countries outside the EU, the consequences of the EU's export restriction could be devastating, especially countries that have come to rely on EU suppliers for their essential medical equipment. The new EU policy threatened to eliminate such country access to global market for medical imports in time of pandemic, such Moldova, Cape Verde, Central African Republic, or Turkey, which depend on import PPE from the EU around 80% until 100%. So it's quite big dependable. Although the EU policy is not a permanent ban and set to expire in 6 weeks, but EU licensing procedure is laudable that requires the completion of a new paperwork and a government authorization before a listed product can be exported outside EU. That is likely to cause further delays and hence constitute another bureaucratic hurdle. So then also the export restriction of medical supply interrupted the production process in terms of global value chain. This is particularly relevant for the production of medicines, medical equipment, and medical consumable. Since the export restriction is not only imposed by EU alone, also 80 countries have introduced export restriction as a result of the pandemic since April. But fortunately, some of them has lifted the export restriction. Yeah, but however, the export restriction from other countries to EU affect the EU regional supply chain because the important production sites of the European, for example, European chemical and pharmaceutical industry are located outside Europe, particularly in United States, China, some of Indonesia, because you also export the raw material for the medicine, South Africa, and so forth. So what we can get the lesson from the EU, yeah. Although export restriction is justified under WTO rules or under EU law, Article 35 and 36 TFEU, export restriction on medical supply and equipment result in enormous additional bureaucratic efforts for the responsible authorities and company. For example, exporter must provide evidence that exported good will be used in essential branches of production in the importing countries. For example, certification or the certificate and also the paperwork. So here I give a recommendation for the issue. There are 3 recommendations. First, solution for the bureaucracy hurdle. The main problem of export restriction during the pandemic is the hurdle of bureaucracy on export license. This leads to the obligation for all countries to notify new trade measures transparently. And these countries should ensure that the export restriction measures are adequately published at the national level, including by making them available on the website, for example, on the website of the national authorities. In addition, the problem of licensing is the overlapping of these standards. So that the solution is that giving a formal recognition and equivalent arrangements for certification and acceptance of foreign standard will prevent the rigid enforcement of national standard that associate to detrimental of the trade itself. And the second is the solution for the trade facilitation. In terms of trade facilitation, countries should make all border process faster and safer. For example, all paperwork related to the movement of goods, including declaration, assessment, and payment of duties, release, and clearance of goods can be carried out digitally to short the process, especially in the time of pandemic, when the most valuable thing is time, right? And the last solution, the last recommendation, is that the duration of export restriction. In terms of duration of export restriction, countries should ensure that the trade restriction is imposed temporarily and reviewed in accordance with the necessity to lift the restriction to avoid the hamper of global production on the essential product to combat pandemic. In sum, today, EU has lifted the restriction, indicating that the EU exempted restriction to a small number of non-EU countries, but only small number. And in the intra-EU trade itself has also implemented trade facilitation measures at the borders, such as green lanes and corridors for fast clearance of essential goods by accepting digital trade-related documents, including SPS or TBT certificate. Anyway, my time is up, and I return the floor to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Intan. A very interesting insight from Dr. Intan about the export restriction from the EU and how the EU should manage their export restriction, especially in the time of pandemic, to ease the movement of goods between countries, especially intra-Europe and outside Europe. So in the question session, there are at the very least 3 questions. The first is for Professor Kim, for Dewi Vartika Ramasari, how EU managed the asylum seekers during the pandemic. And then the second questions regarding the topics that was actually talked by Dr. Intan is about EU is currently taking measures on export restriction for certain products, such as personal protective equipment. It could result in shortage of PPE in countries outside EU. But the dilemma is this kind of behavior is not reflective of EU cooperation values. Then how should EU deal with it? This question is for Professor Kim from CESA Effendi. And the last question is from Dean Fabian. The question is about the impact of US-EU-UK relation and the future of Northern Ireland disputed trade area, and how it will impact the collaboration between European countries in the future. So that is 3 questions for Professor Kim first.
Okay, first the question about the asylum seekers. This is primarily an issue for member states. The EU has some responsibilities in terms of its external borders, in terms also of coordination. But when it comes to processing the applications of asylum seekers, this is done by the member states. Sadly, my title is still apt also in answering this question, namely, it was an unseen crisis. Looking at what happened in Belgium, asylum seekers were simply left in the streets. The applications were not processed. When I walked into the city, I met people who were getting no support. The government had simply suspended its services. Eventually, they developed an online form to start processing asylum applications, but many asylum seekers did not have access to sufficient internet capacity, to a computer, to a phone that was able to process these forms. So sadly, I can only say that also in terms of asylum seekers, it was an unseen and deplorable crisis. The second wave, this has not reoccurred. So now with processes of PPE, distancing, the normal activities in terms of processing asylum applications have resumed. In terms of PPE and the impact that this has more internationally, most PPE is produced in China. So the first country that has an impact on terms of the global distribution of protective equipment is not the EU. We were essentially the importer. And there, I think the reaction of EU member states to also start a domestic production within the EU to ensure that we can supply ourselves at least in terms of the basic needs and the strategic immediate needs, I think also will help in global terms, because it reduces our needs, and we should be able, if there is a crisis, to have a sufficient production to meet emergency needs. Which I think is an answer to your question, that the fact that the EU is a big importer and buys a lot of the world stock is being addressed by having our own production and thereby increasing the global availability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For the last question about the impact of the the UK-EU relation, the future of UK-EU relation.
The EU-UK relation, it's a difficult question for me to answer because I'm an Anglophile. So I like the United Kingdom. I have worked there for 20 years. I studied there. I worked at 2 British universities. Seeing the stupidity of their policy, the ignorance of their politicians is deplorable. Looking at the way that they are dealing with negotiations, the way that the government is misleading their population, I think we are going to hit a major crisis in a matter of weeks. I suspect that some kind of a minimal deal will still be reached, because there is, of course, awareness behind closed doors in London that the impact will be drastic. The EU also wants to have some kind of a deal because the economic impact, for example, on Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany is not negligible. So I expect that a minimal deal will be reached in the coming weeks, maybe with some kind of a fudge on the timeline, so that we don't have to reach this by the end of December. But my assessment in general is that this is a deplorable state of affairs in the UK, and I think a serious lack of leadership in terms of the British government. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Intan, do you have some addition? Sorry, your mic, Dr. Intan.
Sorry, I'm going to give a short answer because I think Kim has answered all the question. Perhaps maybe the second and the third question about the PPA restriction. As we know that in the global value chain, or every country try to fulfill the demand on medical equipment even before the pandemic. So the EU has a certain policy in regard of the export restriction, but not banning. EU basically is implying the export license, and which is other countries also implying the similar policy, like Indonesia as well, implying the certain license, certain document to fulfill. If it's not in pandemic, it's only non-tariff barrier. But the problem is we are running out of time. Producing certain certificate, producing certain authorization, asking, implying, and then discussing, etc. It will take some times. Meanwhile, people are dying over there. Yeah. So there's a problem is the bureaucracy hurdle caused by the new policy on export license, the new policy of export license. Like, for example, if you want to export a cable for the ventilator, you need to have to fulfill the standard, to fulfill the certificate for the SPS, sanitasi, or TBT, something like that. It takes time. So this is what we call export restriction during pandemic. It will actually not resolve the situation, yeah, but it will cause more detrimental not only to the trade but also to the people, for the patient, for example. So that's what most of the country learning to settle, how to overcome the problem on the export restriction or the imposition of export license on the PPE, for example. And the third question is the impact of the EU-UK relations. Maybe in the perspective of trade. I guess that because UK is not a member of EU, that the UK will not be subject on the, for example, common tariff policy, yeah? Because then UK need to again negotiate with EU over certain area, for example, trade and so on. But then you see that the relation between EU and UK today during the pandemic, which more to the humanitarian aid, and if the trade is almost the same, most of the countries got hit with the pandemic, especially because each country tried to save their own necessity, their own need. For example, Vietnam is not exporting rice because they doesn't want to having the experience of a shortage of the food. Indonesia is not exporting hand sanitizer anymore because we are running out of hand sanitizer on April and May, but we are now open up again for the exporter. And also other countries does the UK also doing the same? As I know that you can try not to protect, but actually to prevent the shortage of medical supplier or even food. Maybe that's my answer for the questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Intan. Okay, I guess that concludes our session due to time restriction. A very interesting discussion, so many interesting questions, but unfortunately, due to time constraint, we cannot answer all of your questions. I see that some of your question already answered by the panelists in the Q&A session. A very interesting discussion today about how the EU actually managed the crisis, the pandemic, that many other countries have failed. Although EU initially have failed, the response is not desirable, is not optimal. But there are actually hope for European Union because now they are moving kind of in the right direction, although there are still some worries due to the new surge of cases in many places in Europe. I would quote Professor Zimmerman's argument earlier in our discussion. Although EU is not a shining example for us, because usually we are, as Asian people, as Southeast Asian people, we look up to the EU to see an optimal model of regional integration. But as Professor Zimmerman said, and later Professor Kim highlight, although EU is not a shining example, there are still things that we can learn from EU, many things actually, because there are still the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of integration is still live in European Union. And although there are disagreements, although there are different political interests, different rules in European Union, there are efforts to coordinate the response to the pandemic. And that's, for me, is an important thing because coordination and cooperation is one of the key to tackle pandemic effectively. I think that concludes our discussion. Thank you for all the extraordinary speakers for your insight, your knowledge for us here. I yield back the time to the MC. Thank you and see you on the next discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agastya, for moderating Erasmus Plus Gemone International webinars magnificently. And I would like to give announcement to the, let's say they are the winner because they are addressing questions very insightful. We already got 5 names. The first one goes to Ardo Saratoga. And for the second one, Hasbi. And the third one is Anissa Regita. And also for the fourth is Jessa Effendi. And also we have Muhammad Saud in here. And last but not least, Dean Fabian. Congratulations to all of you guys. You will be get a reward from the committee. Please kindly email your details addressed to ent.grants@global.unair.ac.id. Ms. Safira will assist you with regard to receiving the reward. So, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to once again thank you so much to our distinguished speakers, Professor Zimmerman, Professor Van der Boer, and also Dr. Siti and also Dr. Intan for the excellent and insightful talks. We also would like to express our gratitude to the committee and the participants who have contributed in making this webinar happen. Last but not least, my name is Viro. I would like to encourage all of participants to fill a satisfaction survey we already give through the personal chat. Your feedback will be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. I hope for us good luck. See you in the next webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Goodbye from Surabaya.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ya. Terima kasih Ibu Intan, Ibu Irma. Thank you so much, Prof. Kim, Prof. Hubert.
Thank you very much. Makasih.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. And makasih Mas, makasih Mbak.
Ya,
And,
terima kasih teman-teman. Okay.
Matur nuwun Ibu, Bapak.
And thank you Kim. I think Kim is off or yeah, Kim is already off. Okay. Yeah.
Tak off atau masih omong-omongan lagi? Saya nggak
Ini
tahu
nggak
kalau
ada foto.
kalau
Nggak ada
Pep
foto.
Sampun Ibu, tadi di awal sudah di-took photograph. Tadi Ibu Intan masih di sini belum ya ketika opening session?
Sudah.
Oke, ya. Kalau mau difoto lagi, Mbak Tifa siap Ibu. Jarinya sudah gercep untuk
Itu Ibu,
cekrek-cekrek.
share
Oke.
video share screenshot fotonya di Drive.
Oh, tadinya saya pikir dosen-dosen JM itu masuk ke sini. Ternyata dosen JM-nya masuk ke partisipan ya. Maksudnya kita foto dengan dosen JM yang lain gitu. Tapi ternyata nggak